Hello, hello, and welcome. My name is Sarah Skaversky. I am a research director at IFTF, and we are about to dive in to our IFTF Foresight Talk on building a membership of higher education innovators with foresight research with our longtime friends and collaborators at EDUCAUSE. So I'm going to just kick things off. And to kick things off, I'm actually going to ask you to kick things off by adding into chat your name and location. It's always fun to see where people are joining us from. Please make sure that when you're in chat that you change it. It doesn't just go to host and panelists, but it goes to everyone. And then you can shoot off your message. As we go through, we're going to ask you to please ask your questions in the Q&A or chat, but let me tell you exactly what we're going through today. Right now, I'm going to do a quick introduction and welcome from Institute for the Future, and then I'm going to start into my conversation with the phenomenal Kathy, Betsy, and Janae from EDUCAUSE. We'll have time for audience Q&A, and we have a fun interactive activity at the end to close us out. Institute for the Future, who are we? We are an independent or public interest nonprofit organization founded in 1968 in California in Silicon Valley. And really, our mission is to help you as individuals, communities, organizations, leaders to become future ready. And we do that through providing a bunch of different things. We provide research, we do tools and methodologies, and programming for all of you to engage with thinking about the future, because you can't predict the future, right? But you can engage strategically. You can be looking at systematically at the world that's changing around you today. And so that's what we do at Institute for the Future. And this series of IFTF Foresight Talks is when we bring in amazing individuals from outside our organization who are also doing incredible foresight work to share a little bit about the work that they're doing and how they're engaging their own communities. This is part of our IFTF Foresight Essentials program. It's put on by our Foresight Essentials program at IFTF, which is a portfolio of training activities. And we have a lot of options and opportunities out there for people to engage with us. We recently added on some classes for philanthropy, people engaged with philanthropy in particular, but we have open enrollment, as you can see, from Foresight Essentials to design future scenario building, and then things for teams. So we do custom trainings as well. So we do things like that. We have a lot of different opportunities to join us live online or in person. If you're in New Zealand, or if you're in Asia Pacific, I highly recommend. We have a New Zealand session coming up, but also incredible people from really around the world building out this network. So it's a wonderful opportunity. If you're interested at all, we'll be putting that link into the chat. We also have a lot of other resources out there. So we have the Foresight Talk webinars that we have here. There's also a whole backlog and a whole catalog of other Foresight Talks that we've done. We have a newsletter, which is amazing, really fun and interesting, curated by my wonderful colleague, Aicha Guralp. We have meetups for people who have gone through our courses. We have Medium posts, and then we also have Urgent Optimist, which is an incredible community platform for people wanting to think about the future and really how can we make that integrated into our everyday lives and day-to-day. If you're an organization, we also have a community for you, IFTF Vantage, really wonderful group of different organizations committed to thinking about the future. You gain access to a bunch of different research and resources and connection with IFTF researchers on a regular basis. So if you are an organization, please reach out. We would love to be in conversation with you. Okay, all of that being said, I am here today to share the stage, hand over the stage to a few wonderful people from EDUCAUSE, an educational membership organization. They'll share even more about it, but Kathy Pelletier, Betsy Reintz, and Janae Robert. So director of the Teaching and Learning Program, Kathy is, and Betsy's the director of the CIO and Senior Technology Leaders Program, and Janae is a senior researcher, and I'm going to ask them to come off of their sort of hiding place behind the no video. And, normally we have usually one person come on to these Foresight talks, but you all are this dynamic team that has been working together to bring Foresight really into the higher education community. And so I would love to ask and hand over to you to share a little bit about what you've been doing. I know you've have different sections divided up for different people. I'll be asking you questions, and then people who are here and watching, we'd also love for you to add in your questions as we go. I'd recommend using the Q&A part because that way you can upvote and it doesn't get lost in the chat. But Kathy, I'm going to hand it just over to you to get us kicked off.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having us, Sarah. I'm just going to talk a little bit about what EDUCAUSE is in case folks here aren't familiar with us. As Sarah mentioned, we're a nonprofit association in higher education, and our newly revised strategic plan will tell you that our vision is to inspire the transformation of higher education in service to a greater good, which in some ways is an interesting vision because our primary audience is IT leaders and IT professionals, both in kind of the central IT area as well as teaching and learning, which I serve, and our cybersecurity and privacy professional community as well. But we really believe in connecting our community through insight, through advocacy, resources, learning opportunities, et cetera, that really help advance the strategic use of technology and data in higher education. And we do that through a number of ways. We have a lot of research products. You'll hear a little bit about our Horizon report, which is one of my favorite research experiences, but we do other trends work and other research related to students and faculty and IT workforce. You might be familiar with our EDUCAUSE Review publication, where we invite our members to share what they're working on their campuses, what's working, what's not working, what they're trying, and really focuses on the thought leadership of our community and elevates their voices there. And we also have really amazing conferences events. Our annual conference is a big one. We have maybe 7,000 folks there, and then we have smaller conferences for more targeted audiences. And since the pandemic, as many associations like EDUCAUSE, we've also really branched out into additional online programming that really hopefully meet the needs both of the people that can join us together in person if they are able to do that, but then also those who maybe don't have the budget or are still unable to travel are able to access our programming online as well. We're also hearing more and more from our members that they don't just want to learn about what's happening in higher education, but they want to learn how to take action and really, much more of a concrete, hands-on type of resource. And so we've started developing additional toolkits. Some of those are related to things like digital transformation. We have a cybersecurity and a privacy guide, and that's kind of an emerging area of our programming as well. And I'm going to hand it over to Betsy in just a minute, but my favorite type of programming that we are increasingly focused on is related to Foresight and leverages Foresight tools and activities that we have learned through the Institute for the Future. So really excited to share more about that with you all.
Thanks, Kathy. And I'm gonna talk a little bit about the EDUCAUSE journey through Foresight and how we got involved in it, and how it started, how it has transformed over time. Kathy mentioned the Horizon reports, and we've been actually doing Foresight for about 6 or 7 years now as part of our Horizon report work. And if you aren't familiar with those, they give you ideas about the trends and the key technologies and practices that will be shaping the future of higher education, what shaping higher education in the next 10 years, related to a topic for each one. So we look 10 years out. And they also include future scenarios. So each report has 4 scenarios that describe 4 possible futures as a way of thinking about what might be coming in the next 10 years. So that was our original step into Foresight. Before we took on the Horizon reports, they were already designed to look into the future a little bit. But when we took them on, I want to say 2017, what we wanted to do was improve the methodology and give them a more rigorous treatment. So to do that, we sent 3 staff members to IFTF training, and they came back with some really great ideas that formed the basis of our Horizon Report work at the time. We based the reports on signals and trends found by a fairly large panel of experts. And a little bit later, we'll talk a little bit more about how we do that, how we work with the panel. But just as an introduction, the panel gives us all of the data that we use to determine what goes into the Horizon reports. And then just 2 or 3 years ago, a few others of us, Kathy and Janae and I, went to IFTF training as we're sort of building up our muscles around foresight. And as we sort of digested what we were learning, we realized that we could really improve on the original process for the Horizon reports. We still wanted them to be based in signals and trends that were found by the panelists, but we realized that the panel members needed way more orientation than we were giving them to really understand what to look for. So we revamped the way we dealt with panelists to give them a lot more time to learn about signals in particular and what to look for. And since then, we've also started to use foresight activities in other areas. So we've expanded beyond the Horizon Report products. We're using foresight in many areas where we have gatherings of groups of people to do some planning. We often use an exercise like Find Future Me, for those of you who might have gone through the foresight training yourselves. But an exercise like Find Future Me gets people gets their heads into the future. In that exercise, they imagine what they would be doing 10 years in the future, and they write up a short LinkedIn style professional blurb about it to sort of help them think about what the future might actually be like. And we've conducted several day-long workshops as well that guide people through a series of foresight activities with the idea that they can go back to their institutions and generate some foresight thinking there. As for where we're going, we're still tweaking the process of our Horizon reports, and I think they're going to continue to get better over time as we continue to use foresight exercises with them. And we're going to continue to use foresight with many of our member groups as well, because a lot of what we do, as Kathy was saying, is we help people think about how to do this work. And in order to do that, it's really helpful to think about what the future might be like, just 5 years down the road. So we're focusing some efforts on making the reports more interactive as well. So instead of just reading the reports, people can engage with the information on a much deeper level. So Kathy or Janae, you want to say anything else about our progression and where we're going at this point?
I'll just add that I think a really fun aspect of what we've done in this evolution has been from just sort of getting our training meals on with practicing foresight on our own, and then more and more of us taking classes with IFTF and getting more and more excited as we go deeper and deeper, and then really wanting to share that skill with our members. So it's really moved from, we want to help our members kind of get a sense of what may be coming or how to engage with the future, as they say at IFTF, to we want our members to have these skills too. And we're constantly telling people to take these classes and trying to do workshops with them to get these skills as well. So we're kind of doing both of those things.
That's great. And so I would love to maybe hear, so sort of at the basis and background of these Horizon reports, you've really worked to put together this incredible panel process. Could you maybe, Kathy, give us a little bit about what is the panel process? I know Janae was saying, you started with just you all, now you're bringing more people into it. High level, what is this panel process? How does it work? And then maybe I think you're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the hows. And I know we like to get our hands dirty when we do these foresight talks and really understand the nitty gritty about like, what do you say to people and how does it work?
Yeah. Well, first I'll share that as I started engaging in the Horizon reports related to my area, teaching and learning, it really hit home that so much, and this was before I did the IFTF Essentials course, there was a lot of fuzziness of like, what do you mean signal, or what do you mean driver, and so there was it really struck me that if I was having trouble with this, our panel probably was as well. And one of the things that is really important to us with this Horizon report in particular, and much of our research at EDUCAUSE, is that we really want and need our member, the panel voice, to come through. So the process that we have been continuing to refine, that's kind of our North Star, that we are increasingly inviting panelists to offer high quality, relevant, rich data for us to then pull into the report itself. So as Betsy mentioned, the Horizon report looks at 10 years into the future trends, which is the EDUCAUSE's term for drivers. So, kind of large scale energy toward or away from change in particular areas, as well as we also have a section related to the key technologies and practices that our panel thinks is going to be really important in the next 10 years, particularly with the trends in mind that we've identified for the report. And then we have a scenario section that takes the data from the trends and the key technologies and practices the panels have identified and kind of mashes them up into 4 different potential futures. And so we have found, we've kind of played a little bit with the size of the panel, but we've landed on a size of about 60 people. And we have a large panel because we want to make sure that we're including perspectives from all over the world, that are from different role areas and functions and levels. So not just the leaders at an institution, but folks on the ground or working more directly with students or with the technologies themselves. And we also find that gives us the critical mass, that size of panel gives us the critical mass of data that we need to, again, produce a quality report. So I'll share a little bit at a high level of what the activities that we do with the panel are. But one thing to keep in mind is that we actually have a mashup of foresight activities, but we also use what's called the modified Delphi process, which is another research methodology that is intended to bring a large group of people into consensus about a particular topic. So we kind of toggle between inviting input and nominations of the trends. And we also use, if you're familiar with the IFTF heuristic of the STEEP trends or drivers of different categories of trends, really to kind of get a wide swath of information, not just looking at the particular topic of the report. So STEEP stands for social, technological, environmental, economic, and political. So we asked our panelists to nominate trends that they see in each of those areas, as well as give us evidence for those trends, which is usually a link to a report or an article or other data, and then also provide ideas about the potential impact of that particular trend in the future of teaching and learning or data and analytics or cybersecurity and privacy, et cetera, in the next 10 years. And then the panelists get to talk to each other and say, oh yeah, that's a good one. Here's another article. Or actually, no, I don't think it's going to have that impact. I think it's going to have this other impact instead. So we try to get discussion going from our panelists. And then we do the voting where we say, what are the top ones? So we have all of these trends that you've nominated. The research team does some great kind of coding and synthesis, very light synthesis to make sure we're kind of deduplicating. And then the panel will vote on what the top, I think they tell us the top 6 for each of those 5 categories, which we then bring to the top 3. So we have a total of 15 trends that will be in the report. And we do a similar process with the key technologies and practices. And then finally, we have our scenario section, and that's an area where we have found that we need more panel input. In the past, the internal team had been looking at those data from the trends and key technologies and practices conversations and assuming that we had enough data to mash it up as I've described, and we decided in the last year or so that we wanted to invite the panelists to join us for a synchronous session where they actually get to participate in some additional foresight processes in order to more directly influence those. And so that's a lot, right? That's a lot of activity. There's a lot of foresight happening there. And so one of the changes that we've made recently too is, again, not assuming that our panel could quickly catch on to what a signal is or a trend is, or how the key technologies and practices might be related to the trends. So we've really beefed up our orientation, where we actually have them practice signal spotting and trend gathering, and we do essentially the same types of activities that we would do in the panel as well. And over time, this takes about 4 months for us to train the panel, for them to do these activities. Some are synchronous, or some are async. Most are asynchronous, with just the orientation and the scenario being synchronous. And then the research team again is doing the synthesis and the kind of iterative process of refining into the top ideas that will be produced in the report. So I think I'll stop there because I may have gone into more detail than I intended. But I guess as I stop there, I'll just wrap that up with this idea that and really underscoring that all of the changes that we continue to make to this process are either to kind of stay true to foresight process, and also really make sure that the panel is given as many opportunities as they can to produce informed input that so that really, again, their voices can really be heard in this report.
That's great. Thank you, Kathy. And well, Betsy, as I hand it to you, I'm sort of curious also, you're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into a few areas of the panel process, but how do you even put together this panel to begin with? Who are these people? How did they know to participate? You're saying they're from around the world, different levels. So what does that process look like?
Kathy, do you want to speak to that, or should
Sure.
I? Yeah, okay.
Sure. Yeah, so we do a call for panelists before the Horizon report kicks off, and we ask people to tell us about themselves. So what is their role? A little bit about why they think they'll be able to contribute to the panel and how they think they'll be able to contribute, and also how they live out the values that EDUCAUSE holds related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we also are able to see if people have participated in prior panels as well. For a while, there was kind of a group of kind of the same core folks that were participating year over year, and we wanted to make sure that we were both extending the opportunity to more people in our community, but also making sure that we got, fresh blood more regularly. So we do limit it now to 2 in a row. So you can participate in 2 Horizon reports in a row. And then after that, you need to take a break and give other folks opportunity to participate. But really, when we're selecting,
Nice.
we look at, do we have a balance of, do we have enough CIOs as well as, other roles? And it's a little bit of an art, but we look across geography, as I mentioned, roles, so breakdown of institutional types, et cetera. And it's both an art and a science.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So I guess, Betsy, you have this captive, amazing audience of people from different types of backgrounds. What do you do with them?
Oh boy. And that process of what you do with them is what we've really been working on a lot. What I want to do is show you some slides with some examples of the kinds of things we do. So give me just a second to get my screen shared here. And okay, that should do it. So what I want to do is show you a few slides from our orientation to sort of give you a sense of what it feels like to be there. And as I think we've mentioned, we do these all look 10 years out in the future. They all have a different topic that they're focused on. And the example we're looking at here is from our topic of the holistic student experience. What is the future of the holistic student experience? And we do a couple of exercises to get people thinking about the topic and also thinking about the future. And with this one, with the holistic student experience, we started with an exercise called Look Back to Look Forward. So we use an online whiteboard tool because now we do all of these meetings and all of this work remotely. The idea behind this activity is that by looking into the past, we can see how some really big drivers of change came together to create unexpected futures. And so you can get this sense of what happened in the past and how it has given us a historical perspective to think about the future. So with this one, you go with this idea, the idea of this one is you go twice as far back into the past as you want to look into the future. And since with the Horizon reports, we're looking 10 years out, we went 20 years back to do this exercise. So we went back to 2003 and asked our panelists to think about what was going on over those 20 years that turned into drivers of change or trends that were going to have an impact on the future of this as well. So I know this is tiny and hard to see, but we just wanted to show you sort of a general idea of what the process looks like and feels like. So this is one of the really fun things that we do. We give everybody some time to think about that past and then we have a conversation about what it might look like going into the future. Oh, I went the wrong direction. Sorry, let me back up to right there.
And just a heads up that we're going to hold off on audience questions until just after we finish this part up. So if you can throw your question, Ron, into the Q&A or the chat.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry,
so we
keep it up,
definitely have time for questions. So this is a screenshot of a signals finding activity. So signals are single events. They're a moment in time. They're things that make you stop and think, oh, that's interesting. And we use a simple tool for this called Padlet for the signals finding activity. And I like this screenshot because it shows some notes that Janae Robert, my colleague who's on the call, made during the exercise. This happens during the orientation. We do this to walk people through the process, to give them some feedback on, are the things that they're finding, are these actually signals? One thing we're trying to do is to help people understand the difference between a signal and a trend. And remember that signals are specific, they're local, they're current, they're one instance of something that's really compelling. And a trend, of course, is a larger continuing sort of thing that usually has a direction. So during the orientation, we had them looking for signals on their own and then adding them to the Padlet. And I want to point out Janae's comment in the second one from the left about the English major. She says this could be either a trend or a signal. A story about a university ending its program as a signal. Data about decline over time would be a trend. So we think this sort of instant feedback as they're thinking about signals is an important part of their orientation.
Yeah, and just to say, Betsy, so I mean, one of the reasons just for other folks that we are thinking like, why does it matter if it's a signal versus a trend? And we just use that data in a slightly different way. I would say when we're putting together the weight that we put on things and sort of inputs to various different tools that we have. So that's why, and I love that you're doing this real-time feedback, because this can be really one of the hardest things. Is Kathy was even saying, she's like, oh, is this a signal? Is this a trend? So having this real-time feedback for the panel is just such an incredible learning opportunity, instead of people being like, I think I'm getting stuff, and then sort of sending it out into the ether and waiting until they have a conversation.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think as the three of us have talked about how to help the panel as much as possible, I think that being able to really understand what a signal is and what a trend is it's a really hard concept, and we're still improving on this and helping them understand why. And as you said, it helps to understand why are we even collecting signals? Why are we collecting trends? And for the Horizon reports, it all becomes data. It all becomes data for the material that the researchers put together from this. And they look at all of this data, and Janae's going to speak to this a little bit more in a few minutes, but with the idea that it's the basic building blocks that go into a lot of the other exercises that we do. You need to have those signals in hand in order to be able to continue to do a lot of this foresight work. So what's on the screen now is a snip from a different Padlet. In this case, we're doing, oh, no, it's not. This is still the trends, the signal, sorry. Okay,
I
so
was to say, it looks very similar.
yeah, it looks exactly the same. So for this activity, to identify trends, we divide the panelists into 5 groups, and they work together to think about and look for trends out there. And each group is assigned one of the STEEP categories that Kathy's already mentioned, and those STEEP categories are listed on the top of the slide here. So each group works together to find trends. And I know this is hard to see, but I just wanted to get a sense of what it looks like. And when we're hoping to save some time at the end so that you can actually play with this tool as well, and see what it is that it's like to do this. As we're looking, and the last point I want to make about trends is, as we're asking them to put the trends in the Padlet, one of the things that we ask them to do is also tell us what's the impact here. So sure, there's a trend, but what does it mean for the future of whatever it is we're talking about? And it's that sort of relationship between the trend and then what the panelist is seeing as the impact or the implication that becomes a really important piece of the research as well. Kathy, you want to talk a little bit about what comes next in this process?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And are we talking about scenarios now?
Scenarios, yes, yeah.
So, as I mentioned before, we kind of mash up all of the data related to the trends and the key technologies and practices into these scenarios. And we use the same archetypes for scenarios as were originated in the IFTF world of growth, constraint, collapse, and transformation. And those really offer 4 different ways of imagining kind of different directions the future might hold. And there are kind of rules about those different scenarios that help you author kind of in that directions. And Sarah, you might want to hop in and share any more background on that.
I was just going to say that it's actually not originated at IFTF. It's the incredible Jim Dator, professor emeritus at, oh, wow, Janae even has a book on hand, professor emeritus at University of Hawaii at Manoa, put together that sort of scenario archetype. I love, as a futures person, by the way, I am just geeking out on looking at this image in front of me, and I'm zooming up my screen and sort of seeing the process that you all have put together.
Yeah, thanks for that correction. For some reason, I associate Jim Dator with IFTF, but that's good to know that he is in a different organization. But real quickly, and again, we know that you can't see the detail in here, but we love using Mural for this activity. Both we do an internal kind of kickoff of the ideas about the scenarios that include thinking about the audience, the places, the infrastructure, the stakeholders, and other aspects that might be involved in a scenario to get us ready for an external opportunity for our panelists to come in. And Betsy, the next slide shows how we organize the Mural board for that one. And for those, we really dive into each of the scenarios, and we use a process of really kind of helping our panelists think about those consequences and get even more deeply connected to those potential implications that we've been talking about before. So the work that we do previously in our internal session kind of sets us up for the big chunk of text you see. So in here, this growth scenario, the generative AI proliferates, et cetera. That is where we've kind of set the direction for the growth scenario for the panelists as well. And Rick, I see you in the chat looking for URLs of the murals. I don't think we can share links to those directly at this point, but you can read the scenarios that come from these murals in our Horizon reports.
And I think this is so great. I mean, that you use scenarios in it. Just to clarify for folks, scenarios really are, so we have multiple concepts, right, of forecasts being just statements or stories about possible futures. Scenarios are a type of forecast that really bring it down to the ground, right? Is how is this playing out in real life on the ground? And I think the fact that you're bringing people who are doing this on the ground work, right, already into the process to say, okay, let's place you into this world where X, Y, and Z has changed. What does that mean for the types of activities that you're doing? For what do you think would be changing in the higher education landscape around you? Really brings it to life, and it brings together your Horizon report, I think, in a really beautiful way to take. It's not just these things, but these things come together. It's not just trends, it's not just signals, but there's bigger pictures, and they can interact in really interesting and unexpected ways sometimes. Often, I'd say, not just sometimes. So Janae, I'd love to maybe turn to you about a little bit more about sort of this. You've been going through this whole process really of putting together and adding foresight into your work. But I'm wondering if you could share a bit about how you help people move this idea from foresight, how at IFTF we talk about prepare, foresight, insight, action, the foresight, insight, action cycle. How do you help people take these scenarios and start to make sense of them for what they mean for them?
Yeah, so our next slide, there's a couple of examples of activity prompts that we do with the panelists. So I also should emphasize that we do a separate panel process for moving from insight to action. So we create this Horizon report with all the processes that we've talked about so far. We have a big panel, 40 to 60 people. And then after that report gets published, we take one aspect of the report. So one of the most recent ones was generative AI was something that was mentioned as something that will impact the future of higher ed. And then we bring another panel together of usually about 10 people. I think moving to action, it helps a little bit to have a more quaint group to sort of really dig deep into a topic. And we ask them first to read that Horizon report, get familiar with all of the trends and all of the things that we think will be related to this topic. And then we ask them to construct this preferred futures. This is something that we learned how to do with IFTF, really thinking about, we've presented these 4 different scenario archetypes, but what about the one we want to see? Let's work towards that. And so we ask them to describe those characteristics of that preferred future, what they want to see, think about the threats and opportunities that are posed for that future. So what are the potential threats to us getting to that future? What are the opportunities that we have in our present day that we can leverage to get to that preferred future? And then what are the specific actions that we need to take to get there? And so that's what we do with the panel for action. And we publish a separate report following up, helping the community move into action. And that's also where we encourage readers to undertake their own action planning. So we kind of walk them through the steps a little bit and say, we encourage you to kind of bring folks together at your institution and develop your preferred future and think about what actions you want to take. So that may get at some of the questions in the Q&A too that I've been seeing folks are asking about. How do we get people to focus on action, and what skills do we want them to have? Well, those are some of the answers to those questions right there. And then I did also want to mention on the next slide, just as a researcher, that I view strategic foresight as really one of the tools in my toolbox. So I always encourage people to think about the research question they have. What is it that you want to know? So it's not like I have completely transformed the way I do research, like on everything. It's just that now every time I have a research question that's future focused, I'm like, aha, I have a new tool to do that, or a whole bunch of tools that I got from IFTF. So that was just another important little tidbit I wanted to throw in there, just that these are amazing tools that are just now part of the toolbox for thinking about your work.
And I guess sort of on that end, thank you so much to all of you for the work that you've been doing. And Kathy, I know that you need to leave in a few minutes, so I just want to do a little round of applause to you as well. But sort of, I'm curious if this is the case for you. For a lot of people in their organizations, you sort of need to justify the use of foresight, right? You need to say, oh, we need to think about the future because, or this tool is an important one to have in our toolbox because. And I'm curious your experience with your member base, if you've had any pushback or how you sort of describe the importance of this to them, if that's changed over time. I know, you talked about taking over in 2017 versus 2023 or in sort or 2024. We're in a sort of different world now. So curious a little bit about that.
I can speak to that one. And I think I'll stop sharing my slides now unless Janae, was there something else you wanted to show in the slides? Okay. So I think that's a great question. And I think we look at, as Janae has said, we look at this whole area of work as one of our tools. And it's a tool that we use and it's a tool we want our members to use. And I think we've connected it most recently to work we're also doing around institutional resilience. So following or during the pandemic, people were really trying to figure out how to even keep their institutions moving, how do you keep going? But then there's also this other, so that there's a resilience aspect of that, but then there's also this aspect of resilience that has to do with capitalizing on whatever the current issue is, what your challenges are, and making things better as a result. And so we look at Foresight as a way to help people do that. So it's a way to help them think about upcoming challenges. Nobody knew there were people who knew, I'm sure, but most of us had no idea what was going to happen with the pandemic. We didn't know that was coming. We didn't know it was coming then. And so, our take on it is that there are all sorts of things that are out there in the future that we don't know yet. We don't know that they're happening. And to be able to really manage that, you need to be a resilient institution. And having foresight, using foresight practices is one way to really think about what the future might hold and to start making the changes now that are going to be able to move you to whatever future you want to have happen and to mitigate the futures that you don't want to have happen. So I think I would not say I don't think we've encountered any sort of resistance from people about, I don't want to think about the future. I think more about helping them understand that you're not learning to predict the future. What you're doing is you're using another tool to think about strategy. So what is our strategy going to be for overcoming our challenges? And I think thinking of it as a sort of strategic planning tool sort of helps people understand immediately how it can help them.
And I guess, go ahead, Janae, please.
Well, 2 quick tips for me, because that way we can get to more questions. But one is, I think it really helps to emphasize the importance and the value of being proactive rather than reactive. And again, what Betsy said, we've had tons of examples lately in our society that have helped us say, wouldn't it have been better to be proactive about this than react? And then the other thing, which gets into the insight to action piece, is, I definitely, especially currently talking about the future of AI in higher education, really emphasize this idea that we can create the future that we want to see, that we're not passive recipients of what happens and what this storm of life happening around us, but that if we take a little time and we think about the future and we think about what could happen and what we want to happen, then we can create the things that we want to happen. So those are my 2 little kind of ways to get people to get excited about this.
That's great. And I think that sort of gets at, and Janae, I know you're alluding to some of these things before, but we have questions from Beck Cooperman, and Catherine Prince. Hi, Catherine. About sort of this idea of encouraging people to take action, and then also about increasing interactivity of your reports, which I think I sort of see as potentially very interconnected, very linked. As you were saying, your panel process for bringing people into action. I know that you're continually, as any good researcher and organization should, you're continually updating the process to make sure that it's effective for your organizations. So curious if you could speak to that, either encouraging people to take action, but also how do you think about the interactivity of your report, or the format, the way you present, not just the behind the scenes process, but the out to the world process?
So it's sort of two two separate things, but I'll speak to the interactive piece a little bit because that's been in my mind lately. So right now, our Horizon reports are PDFs. And what we're, so it's a sort of a long-term process to turn that into something more interactive. But the idea, we've got a lot of ideas, but one of the ideas that I'm most excited about is a sort of the type of scenario that would be a kind of choose your own adventure. So you could, in my vision of this future, which we're working towards, you would be able to see what our scenarios that we've developed would be. But then there would be levers that you could pick and say, well, I think if I do this, how would that change this scenario in the future? And then you'd get a sort of a different kind of idea of what the scenario might look like. So we're not going to be able to do that in the immediate term, but that's on the plate to do over a longer period of time. On a more closer term idea, we've really been thinking a lot about exemplars, and this is an aspect of the Horizon report that I don't think we've really spoken to, but one of the things that we always include is a set of exemplars from institutions who are doing really cool things in the areas we're looking at. And we would like that to be more interactive so that people could, click on something and dive into it in more detail, or that they could also submit their own information and say, hey, I'm doing something really cool in that way too, and have a sort of building compendium of scenarios like that. And then the other piece about helping people actually work with this and dive into it themselves. I think, one of the things that we've done recently is, or in the last 2 years anyway, is these action plans that Janae was referring to earlier. And the whole idea about those was, how do you take the ideas in the Horizon report, which was really it's just the what. Here's this really great information, but then what do I do with it? What's the how? How do I do something and turn this into action? So our idea with the action plans is that you take one piece of something in the Horizon report and you build a set of exercises to help people think about how they move into that future. And Janae, do you want to speak to that a little bit more, because you're really involved in those?
In the action plans, is that what you were just talking about? I was reading the Q&A, so.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the action plan.
It's okay. Yeah, so in terms of trying to draw people in to take action from the action plans, it's not just about it. It's actually not a hard sell. I know people ask, like, how do you get people to take action? The truth is that, I don't know if this is true across industries, but in education, our members really don't want to see anything unless it's actionable. If I don't give them research that they can then take and do something with, it's a waste of their time. So I don't think it's a hard sell, for one thing. But we also, we're really good at EDUCAUSE with creating community around topics and around things that need to get accomplished. And so we're also working on that. I'd say that's like an earlier efforts thing in our futures portfolio, but really trying to start getting more of a community around folks who are interested in foresight and in moving those things to action. But yeah, I'm going to stop there because there was a conference question that I wanted to address, but I'll wait until we get to
that. Yeah, I was going to say, I know we have a few questions, but you also had people were expressing interest in the Padlet and sort of really trying to understand that process hands-on. I didn't know if you wanted to share that little activity and at least allow people to see what that looks like and what that experience is like before we, close out, answer any more questions. I know, Rick, you had a few questions about the types of skills you need to thrive in the future. I might have completely messed that up in the chat, but I did answer it in the Q&A, and we have a really wonderful report called Future Skills. I'm really thinking about what are the skills that people need to thrive in the future. So I'll put that in the chat as well, because I'm not sure if the Q&A thing went over right.
So I linked the Padlet in the chat. Hopefully folks are able to click on that. If not, we can send that link at some other time. I know Aisha mentioned sending links. But so this is essentially what we do. I'll share my screen just in case folks don't have it.
I can do that if you'd rather, Janae.
Okay, yeah, go ahead if you
Okay.
have that there. This is essentially this is the way that we structure the activity with our panelists, where we have a Padlet, we have 5 categories, one for each type of trend category within the STEEP framework. And then we ask folks to list those trends that they want to nominate, along with evidence of the trend, and then what impact that will have on the future of X, whatever it is that we're studying. And so I just threw a couple of examples in there just to show you how it works. But if you want to play around, if you have access to it now, and add just whatever trends you've been thinking about lately, it'll give you a chance to play with the tool. It's also a really fun tool because you can add multimedia. So if you wanted to add pictures, if you wanted folks to be able to share signals, for example, and they wanted to like share a picture of a thing that they think will influence the future or something like that. This is why we really love this tool, because it's so versatile. And then on the research side, we can just download a CSV file of all of the entries that are there. And I use that file to organize and code all of the data. So a fun little tool.
It's so fun. I mean, I love seeing different practical tools that you can try out. I know that at IFTF, we've created future factors, which is where we do our sort of signal sharing, because we found we're like, nothing's really fitting what we need. And so it's great to see the tools that work for different people. And I think the most important and powerful thing about the tool as well is what you all have been talking about with community. It's about participatory futures. It's about bringing in people and helping them to have this conversation with each other. It's not talking at people, it's talking with people. And I think that's really one of the major things that you've hit on, is that power of community. I know we have some folks that say that they're part of Urgent Optimists. That's the biggest part for us. It's just having these other people that are interested in the future and to create that space. I think for you all, really with that, the helpfulness of also having this shared interest and focus. It can be great to have people from different areas as well, but playing around with that.
I just mentioned one thing about this tool
Yeah.
too, is that there is kind of a limitation. If you wanted to do this process the way we do it, we do rely on it's a research project. So this is not a project where I'm telling everybody what I think. It's a project where I'm telling everybody what our panel and what our community thinks. So we rely on having a good amount of data from our panelists to be able to report. And what we found is with a lot of these tools our panelists are busy people, and so this is all done asynchronously. We don't get tons of really rich data from any sort of online discussion platform. People sort of put their idea and then go on and check their email. So what we've done to fix that issue is we use this tool just for the trend nomination process. But once panel votes and we end up with our final trends that are going to the report, we send out an additional survey actually to all of our panelists, and we ask them some specific questions about how each of the trends may impact the future, and some specific dimensions of each one that we're interested in. So I can say it's not perfect. We don't get all the data we need, but also it's a great first step.
Yeah. Oh, and I see that we have a new addition here. And I guess what I would ask, final question, I'm seeing there's one more question in the Q&A, and it's sort of about the outcome, right, from some of these things. If maybe you could share a little bit about this whole future of the holistic experience, student experience that you really were looking at in the Horizon report. Like, how do you see, what are some things that you heard from people about AI versus traditional education system versus online platforms? Just maybe a few little tidbits as people are adding things in.
Sure. So one thing to note is that every Horizon report has a different topic or flavor. So this holistic student experience is one. We also every year just do a general teaching and learning one. So I'll speak kind of a little bit more broadly, just in case different folks have different questions. But I think right now, no surprise to anybody, there's a big focus on the future of AI in higher education. But specifically when it comes to education, there's an intense interest in AI fluency and digital fluency. So as educators, we have a much bigger picture thinking. Instead of just worrying about what's the next app or tool that's going to come down the line, we're thinking a little more strategically about our students going into the workforce in the future and what that looks like, and what kinds of fluencies will they need to kind of be a good worker, but also a good citizen in our digital society. So this is a lot of what folks are thinking about right now. Also popular in sort of, I think, the general discourse, but also in higher education circles, thinking about mental health issues. We've heard unprecedented amounts of students coming forward saying that they need help with mental health issues. So this is something that folks are looking at for the future of higher ed. And then we always have a political category because of the heuristic that we use, but something that's been pretty consistent over the last few years is concern about increasing divisiveness. And there are some polling data out there that kind of look at the evidence for how this divisiveness goes beyond just the news outlets yelling at each other, but that people really kind of hold these different beliefs, and how that plays out on our campuses. So those are some of the big ones right now that are showing up in a lot of our work.
Well, thank you so much. Any hints about what we can expect in 2024 from the Horizon Report? What the topic is going to be like, and you're in the process of doing that right now?
Well, we'll do another teaching and learning. So we always do that every year. We're going to do a privacy and security report. That's coming. And then maybe a little insider information if you want something that's not publicly widely known, but we are working on a new report type that'll dive a little bit deeper into immediate action. So all of our products, all of our Foresight products right now look at a 10-year time horizon. But we understand that there are certain issues that are quite urgent and quite pressing and need people to be able to take action with the resources they have, instead of focusing first on resource building and infrastructure building and thinking about that distant future. There are some things that we really need to figure this out like today. And so we're going to be working on a new report type this year. And yeah, stay tuned to see what that looks like.
Yeah, that'll be great. Thank you so much. Before folks leave, so let's give a huge round of applause to Betsy, to Janae, to Kathy, who had to leave. But I want to share a few things coming up that actually would be a really wonderful complement to this, and all of the really incredible work our wonderful friends at EDUCAUSE have been doing. We have a few just other Foresight talks coming up for people who are interested in expanding their Foresight process and thinking of, you all are talking about creating this community, right? Well, let's talk about community and networks. Our next Foresight talk is going to be Wednesday, February 14th, with Victoria Mulligan, who is in New Zealand, and she is mapping a national futures network. Even before then, we actually have something just next week that we're now finally able to share out, which is with Jennifer Rodriguez from the Youth Law Center, looking at the future of a project that happened on the future of extended foster care in California, and how we think about that. She's a really phenomenal person organization. Highly recommend that. That's going to be 1 week from today, and I'm just going to add that link into the chat. And then we also have, if you want to go, so we have the 14th, Valentine's Day. The next day, we also have our IFTF signal swap. It's a really fun 30-minute, and this is the philanthropy edition, but 30 minutes of just sharing 3 different researchers sharing out 3 different signals that the others had never heard of before. And we just share and we model, how do you talk about signals in a really productive way? Really thinking about the process that you all at EDUCAUSE have been doing just this really phenomenal job of, is bringing together these communities and having those conversations. So those are some other opportunities on the horizon. Again, just really want to thank you all for being here, for your wonderful questions. You were just right from the start throwing out questions, really interested. And thank you to EDUCAUSE for your wonderful work, your partnership, bringing this foresight to your community and to the wider world. So thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you again soon.